Wala nekem. Kwe medawolotio. Wel dasi de kwe uloni walag. Mudel dasi wasa li expected o dan dit wishkuwe. Good evening. I'm honored to be here. I have to admit, I am shocked. I did not expect this at all. I did not expect the technology to be so highly advanced. When Etienne said, I want you to come and speak to an online class that I have, I expected us to be in a dark little room with a computer in front of us. So forgive me, I'm kind of taken aback by all of this. Anyways, I am also very impressed. So I'm quite impressed actually because as Etienne said, I am back at school and I am taking courses online and through St. FX and Mount St. Vincent and Acadia, and it's nothing compared to this. So CVU starts it all, eh?
Begins and ends here.
Yes.
It happens here.
It happens.
Yes, it happens. This is where it's at. So in talking about education, of course, I really wanted to start off with education traditionally for Mi'kmaq people. And prior to the arrival of Europeans back in the early 1400s, education, of course, was taught by elders in your community, your parents, and your older siblings. And you were taught the basics of life to survive and everything that they did from hunting and gathering was taught by their older family members. And contrary to what everyone believes, we were not sitting on a log waiting for Columbus to arrive. My dad always tells me that story. And in fact, you know, growing up, this is how he always explained things to me. We weren't just sitting around waiting for them to come, is what he would always tell me. So, you know, and honoring and respecting some of the things and the ways that my elders were taught. I often think of, and we always learn through stories and sharing of stories, and a lot of times there was so much humor, and that's such a huge and such an important part of our history and our lives and our traditions, because there's always humor in everything that we do. So one of the stories that one of my uncles would share with me all the time was his father would take him out and of course teaching him how to hunt, and that was their survival back then. And they would sit and he would always ask questions and you know, following his dad along, and they would be, you know, going to this little pond, and they'd be sitting around the pond, and they were sitting there for a couple of days counting all the species of animals that were around the pond. And he would sit there quietly and they would count, and his father would teach him the differences of the different species and whether they were male or female, and they would, you know, make a count, and he would tell him, do you remember how many we saw yesterday and what we saw yesterday? And he would sit there so quietly in observation, and I believe that's science, right? So observation and science. He was learning about the species of animals, or they were learning, and he was counting and taking a census of how many animals there were there. And he was also learning and telling him which ones they would be able to hunt. If there was an overabundance of the animals, then they would be able to hunt that animal. And of course, hunting that animal didn't, you know, you just didn't go out and just kill it for the sake of killing it. It was because you needed food to survive. And of course, there would be a protocol that would follow that. After the hunting, they would give thanks to the animal for their life, for the animal giving its life for their survival. And so this is how he was taught by his father. And of course, he went to school as well. And he went on to university, and many times he shared many other stories with me about fishing, how they would know when it was time to do the eel fishing, when it was time to go out for eel fishing. And I would ask him, well, how did you know that? I thought you just picked up your boat and went out. He said, no, that's not how it's done. It would have to be at the time when the leaves were budding, when the leaves were beginning to bud. That's when they would go out and hunt for the eel, when they would go out for eel fishing. And the eel fishing I'm talking about is the spearing with the boat on the canoe and spearing of the eels. So you would go out and get your eels when it was time to do that. And then you would do go out and get your fish when it was time for that. And there was a time for everything. And of course they would observe the environment. The environment was always observed because that's when you would know what you would do and when you would do it. So all of those lessons were taught by their parents or maybe their grandparents. Some of us had the pleasure of being brought up by grandparents or even foster parents. So they were our teachers. Those were the days where, that's how you were taught. This is how education was back then. And always, you would always be reminded that whatever you did in nature, you always had to think 7 generations ahead. You would always have to think of the future. You would always have to remember that someday your children and great-grandchildren are going to need this. So you would not just go out and kill animals or, just for the sake of the hunt and just to be a show-off, I guess, is how the terminology would be. So that was how we lived, and that was how we were educated, and that's how we passed on our traditions and culture and language. Because it wasn't just the hunting. You had to go out and cut down trees as well for your basket making. And you also had to do other things that in order for you to survive. You needed everything in the animal was used when it was hunted. Everything, the skin, everything was used. And everyone knew how to do it. There's so many times and so many stories that were shared with my family, and always in fun. And when I think back, it wasn't just about laughing and carrying on. It was them passing on their traditions. It was how they taught us about life and survival. And so I really was reminded last week when I went to my own class, and one of the students was who is in arts and going to be doing arts-based research. And when she was talking about her art, and I'm thinking, so many times when I would sit in front of my grandmother who was making ash baskets and telling us all these stories of when she was younger and how she was brought up and how her mother taught her how to bake and how her grandmother taught them how to make baskets. All of those stories came rushing back to me, and I thought, well, that's how she was educated, and this is how she's educated us. And so I was really, thinking, wow, that's incredible. That was our education system back then.